Virtue is one of the most praised qualities, I think, in our culture today, right? I mean, we look up to those who seem selfless and disciplined and moral. And we applaud people who live by the rules, who keep the peace, those who make sacrifices for the greater good. And on the surface, I think virtue feels like the pinnacle of character, right? It looks safe, it looks admirable, it looks like the answer. But here's the tension though. Virtue, I think, can also be a mask. See, sometimes being good isn't the same as being whole. Sometimes virtue becomes a performance and it becomes a way of looking honorable while avoiding what's really happening on the inside. And it can become about appearances, about keeping people's approval, about maintaining an image of goodness, even if it costs us our own authenticity. And when virtue becomes, like when it comes at the expense of integrity, it stops being a strength. And in essence, it becomes a prison. But integrity, I think, is different. Integrity doesn't ask, how do I look to others? No, integrity asks, am I aligned? Are my actions and my inner values consistent? See, virtue alone can polish the outside, but integrity insists that the inside must match as well. And without this alignment, no amount of external goodness can create real intimacy. See, I know this because I've lived this tension. There were seasons in my life when I wore virtue like a badge. I said the right things. I did what was expected. I looked reliable and steady. People admired me, but inside I felt split. I was performing goodness rather than living wholeness. I was I was serving others while ignoring myself. And the more I performed, the more hollow I became. See, that wasn't integrity. That was a divided life. I think young men especially face this trap today where we're told to be the good guys, right? Don't rock the boat, be dependable, make sacrifices, follow the script. And while some of these qualities are noble, they can all they can also like become ways of disappearing. And so we learn to prioritize the image of being good over the reality of being honest. And then we become performers of virtue rather than men of integrity. And the danger is quite subtle. Like virtue performed without integrity looks impressive, but it really undermines intimacy. It makes people admire us for what we show, but never know us for who we truly are. And without being known, there can be no real connection, can there? Because intimacy is not built on appearances, it's built on being present. Integrity calls us out of that performance. It challenges us to stop hiding behind our goodness and to start living in our alignment. And that means that we're telling the truth even when it risks approval. That means we're honoring our boundaries even when that may look selfish. That means we're choosing wholeness over image. And that choice is, I think, what makes intimacy possible because it brings the real self into the light. Virtue without integrity often shows up as this kind of moral performance, though. But like we will follow the rules, not out of conviction, but out of fear of judgment. And we serve others not from a sense of wholeness, but more so from this desperate need to be accepted. And so we present ourselves as selfless, all while we'll be neglecting the truth of our own hearts. And on the outside, it looks admirable, whereas on the inside, it feels empty. And the danger of this performance is that it creates distance. See, people may praise us for looking good, but they actually don't know us. They know the version that we've curated for them, the polished surface, the one that hides the cracks beneath. And the more that we live in this gap between appearance and reality, the more divided we become. See, we may be celebrated as virtuous, but inside we feel unseen and even fraudulent. And I think us young men have inherited the script that says we're supposed to be the good son, the good friend, the good man, the one who learns to equate goodness with compliance. And so we avoid confrontation and we overextend ourselves and we erase our limits, all so that we can maintain this image of being good. But goodness, when it's divorced from integrity, is not strength. It's avoidance, and it slowly robs us of intimacy, because again, intimacy requires the courage to be real. And I do remember this trap myself. Like I would say yes when my heart was screaming no, right? Just to keep the image of being reliable. And I've chosen silence when I really should have spoken up, just so that I could maintain the harmony or the sense of it. And I thought I was practicing these virtues, but in reality, I was just abandoning integrity. And every time the cost was connection. People may have liked the good version of me, but they weren't encountering the real me. They were really relating to the mask that I was wearing. See, integrity demands a harder path. It asks us to let go of the need to look good and instead embrace the commitment to be whole. It insists that our actions line up with our inner values, not just the social expectations, but see, that sometimes is the part that people really applaud. Sometimes they may not understand, and sometimes integrity will actually look more like defiance. But in the end, though, it's the only way that I think we can experience peace. The only way that we can actually approach alignment. Virtue, when it's rooted in performance, will keep us fragmented. Whereas integrity, when it's lived out honestly, will make us whole. And wholeness is where intimacy flourishes. Because people don't want our performance as much as they want us. They want the truth of who we truly are, not just this appearance of being good. And this is why integrity matters more than image. Image may win the applause, but it cannot sustain true connection. Only integrity can do that, because only integrity brings us fully into the relationship without having to split ourselves up between what we're showing and who we truly are. And one of the clearest signs, I think, that we've really confused virtue with integrity is when goodness, our goodness, begins to cost us our honesty. And so we stay quiet instead of speaking the truth. And we agree to things that we don't believe just so that we can keep the peace. And we prioritize looking reliable over actually living authentically. And so, like I said, we wear that badge of being good, whereas underneath we are disappearing. Now, this is not wholeness. This is devastating fragmentation. And fragmentation always weakens intimacy, because intimacy requires us to bring our full selves into that relationship. If all people get is a performance of virtue, they never really get us then. They only get the curated version of the relationships that we're in, that are built on images that cannot last. And here's where young men struggle, I think, because the culture we're in rewards this show of virtue. A good man is admired. He's celebrated for his sacrifices and his discipline and his politeness. But if that man sacrifices his integrity in the process, his goodness feels hollow. And yes, he wins admiration, but he loses connection. He may look honorable, but he doesn't feel whole. And it's devastating when you're in that zone where you look noble while you're feeling completely unseen, especially on the inside. When you're being admired, but eventually that doesn't get enough, because appearing virtuous cannot sustain, right? Because being praised for the mask never really satisfied. It's only being loved for who we truly are that can hit that deep spot of affirmation. And integrity, unlike virtue, I think refuses to trade that wholeness for applause. It insists that alignment has to be there, even when it costs us approval. It pushes us to say no when everything in us wants to say yes, just so we can look good. It calls us to confront rather than comply, to risk being misunderstood rather than to misunderstand ourselves. Integrity is much harder to pursue than performance, but it brings freedom. This is why integrity leads to intimacy in a way that only it can, instead of being virtuous. See, when we live with integrity, people will get the real us. They may not agree with us in that zone, but and we may lose the applause, but at least they know you. And being known is really the foundation of intimacy, whereas being admired for an image is not. Now, the difference between virtue and integrity is really that difference between surface level stuff and deep stuff, between the image and the reality of how things are, between the performing and how things really are in the present. Integrity that's lived from alignment is it's about being whole, and only wholeness makes intimacy possible. So I think virtue has its place. It shapes communities and guides frameworks morally, right? It teaches us discipline. But when it's separated from integrity, it becomes performance, and it becomes a costume that we wear to be approved rather than a reality that we live our lives from wholeness of who we truly are. And no amount of being good can make up for the emptiness that comes from actually being whole. Integrity is different. Integrity is, it's not about polishing. It's not about presenting as if we've made it. It's about living aligned. It asks the harder questions like, am I being honest? Am I being consistent? Am I bringing the truth of who I am into the spaces that I'm living in? And while integrity doesn't always look glamorous, I mean, sometimes it looks like saying no, right? Or disappointing others' expectations. At least it is always the pathway to peace. So, because peace does not come from external applause as much as it comes from inner alignment. And this distinction, I think, especially for young men, is so crucial. We don't need more performance of goodness. We need men who live with integrity, men who don't just keep the rules, but who actually live from conviction. Men who aren't afraid of risking being misunderstood because they're living honestly, because that's where wholeness is found. And wholeness is really where intimacy begins. Listen, here at Uber Vintagers, this conviction is what drives me to share. It's my mission to help men, young men especially, not only to pursue being good, but to be whole. And this doesn't come through image management. It comes through courageousness. It comes through the courage to be known fully and honestly with nothing hidden behind the performance. And here's why I think today's theme connects to something much larger we're going to unpack next month. Virtue without integrity, gentleness without courage, affection without truth. I think these are not isolated struggles. These are a bigger pattern of this movement I call the 764 movement, devastating movement. It's about unmasking the ways that fear disguises itself as a virtue, and then reclaiming a life that's rooted in presence and truth and wholeness. So soon I'll be unpacking this framework more fully. But for now, let me pose this challenge. See, virtue may win you admiration, but only integrity will give you intimacy. See, virtue may polish your image, but only integrity will bring you peace. It's true, virtue may look impressive, but only integrity will make you whole. And wholeness is what we're really after here, because only when we are whole can we be fully known. And only when we're fully known can we truly love. My dear listener, one more episode tomorrow to finish off the season this month on virtues or vice. Thank you for listening this far. Let me know in the comments down below how this episode landed with you. See you in the next episode.